On this week's 51%, we speak with biologist turned wildlife photographer Kirsten Hines about her new book, Wild Florida, and what can be done to better protect the state's diverse population of birds, mammals, reptiles, and insects.
The solution is just making sure that we have these connections to the natural areas.
We also stop by a conference for women in STEM in upstate New York and speak with the leading ladies of the battery tech company Qnovo about their work in electric vehicles. I'm Jesse King. It's all up next on 51%.
I was standing around like one of those girls I had seen in a movie. The whole world was a movie back then. I had my sunglasses on, I wanted to be seen without seeing shy Lolita. I wasn't really in it, I didn't really get it.
You're listening to 51%, a WAMC production dedicated to women's issues and experiences. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Jesse King. We've got a roundup of stories and interviews with women in STEM today. We'll hear all about some of the cool things they're working on in their fields. But first, we'll hear from Kirsten Hines, who is perhaps quite literally doing field work. Hines is a biologist turned wildlife photographer based in Miami, Florida. She got her master's in biology from Florida International University, wrote numerous articles, and worked as an environmental educator before shifting her focus from lab work and research to wildlife photography. Every day, Hines grabs her camera and gets up close and personal with nature. She's taken pictures of wildlife in 55 countries across all 7 continents. But for her latest book, she focuses on the ecology of her home state of Florida. Wild Florida, an Animal Odyssey, contains more than 200 pictures of over 100 species. She sees it as an opportunity to teach readers about Florida's diverse landscape, it's not all palm trees and marshes after all, and help them feel more connected to the world around them.
For most people that are not in Florida, they sort of think of it as, oh, there's tropical animals, right? You can see alligators there, you can see crocodiles there, but they're not thinking about the big picture. And if you're in the Panhandle especially, that was always attached to North America. And so it has, and in fact is still connected via the Apalachicola River to the Appalachian Mountains. And so there's huge temperate biodiversity there. And for its size, it's got some of the highest numbers of amphibians and reptiles and plant species anywhere in the nation. So it's got this huge biodiversity of temperate species, including things like beavers and chipmunks and other species that people do not think of when they think of Florida. When you move a little further south, though, the rest of the peninsula all through time was going undersea, part of the continent, back onto islands, it was kind of going through this fluctuation. And so during that time, some of these places, particularly Central Florida, was a whole series of little beach dunes, basically. And so we have this really unique habitat there that animals evolved separate from everything else. And so we have a lot of endemic species that only occur on this scrub habitat in Central Florida. And then by the time you get to southeastern Florida, where I live, we are basically part of the Caribbean. I mean, we're an extension of the Bahamas and Cuba, and we've got all kinds of plants and animals that come from there. And then the thing that I think is really cool about Florida is that it's all blended together. And so wherever you are, there's this odd mix of temperate and tropical that you don't really get anywhere else.
So tell me a little bit more about your work. Like, what is it like being a wildlife photographer? Because I think the image I have, and maybe other people think it too, is, just like someone like patiently waiting in like a valley or like a savanna somewhere, just waiting for the animals to come up to you. But I feel like maybe that's not it.
I mean, there is a certain amount of just sitting there, right? But you're not normally sitting there with the animals crawling over you. That's definitely special circumstances. And in Florida in particular, like even our panther, right, if you think of panthers and you're like, oh, they're dangerous animals, ours are really gentle and very, very wary. They're very shy in general. And so you spend a lot of time looking. And so I spent many, many, many hours hiking around partly, but even more than that, if I could find a place where I knew was good for wildlife, I would just sit in my vehicle with the windows down, totally quiet, and just sit and wait and hope something was going to happen. So there was a lot of kind of scoping the areas out. And then once I discovered, oh, this is a good spot for this, and I would just keep going back and going back. And yeah, a lot of sitting quietly and waiting. So I think part of the hardest part probably was just the mental aspect of like, okay, you didn't see anything today, but maybe tomorrow. And being able to just keep going, like, okay, today was really depressing, but just think one of these days you're going to see a mom panther with her cubs, which happened, and it's like, okay, that makes it worthwhile. That makes me feel like I can do another one.
So for this book, what was the hardest animal for you to find and take a picture of?
I didn't expect it, but it ended up being a bear. Everybody was like, oh, Ocala, there's bears everywhere. And sure enough, my very first outing, I went to Ocala and I'm camping, and the campground host said to me, oh, you should be just warned that this campsite in particular, the bears really like. So there's a mom that's been bringing her cub here every day. I'm thinking, cha-ching, great, that's what I need. And of course, they did not come the entire time I was camping there. Fast forward 2 years later, and my book deadline was a month away, and I still did not have bears. And even though I had done so much work to try and get bears, and I had, gone out with hunters, and I was using these like human blocking scent potions, and, I was doing everything. I bought my first camo jacket. I'd never had a camo jacket before, but I was like, maybe I need to do this. And it turns out that bears actually have an incredible sense of smell. And so, they weren't necessarily seeing me. They were smelling me from a long ways away and avoiding me actively. And I was desperate. I was like, I went to these people's house and I said, I know you have bears in your yard, and I'm just going to camp out here until I finally get a picture. And I was literally like, I'm just going to stay here the whole month. I have to have these pictures. And then my luck changed. Within 24 hours, I saw 4 or 5 different bears, including a mating pair. And I was just like, oh my goodness.
I know as a biologist that you're bringing a lot of background knowledge into the job. You don't necessarily need like a guide to tell you where to go or what you're looking at. But I'm curious, do you get nervous at all getting up close with panthers and bears? What are you doing to protect yourself out there?
I definitely was using my Jeep as a blind. And if you think about African safaris, right, if you're in the vehicle, they don't look at you as a person. They're looking at the vehicle and they just learn to ignore that. If you get out of the vehicle, suddenly you're prey. And so I was kind of counting on that. And in fact, that one morning when the bears were mating right in front of me, afterwards, the male came quite close to my Jeep and looked right in the window. And he was looking straight at me. And I was like, of all the things that happened, that was the most nerve-wracking to me, because he's looking straight at me and he's not that far away. And I'm like, oh boy. But, he just was kind of like, okay, whatever, and kept going. So I became comfortable the more I did it, because I was like, they're trying to get away from me mostly.
I'd like to talk a little bit about how the landscape is changing, especially with climate change. How are the different ecosystems in Florida shifting right now, and what does that mean for the animals that live there?
Yeah. Everywhere has changed a lot. As we talked about, it used to be underwater and now it's open. And of course, sea level is changing again. So there will be more changes. The thing that, and this is not just Florida, this is everywhere in the world, the thing that's different now is that the changes are happening so quickly. And a lot of them are changes that we as people have created. And so animals and plants have had a harder time adjusting to that. And also, we're taking up huge pieces of prime real estate, right? So since I've lived in Miami, I've seen the city expand, and I've been in Miami now for about 20 years. I've seen the city expand closer and closer to the Everglades all the time. And we have a buffer, but that buffer is constantly, we're having to fight battles to keep development out of that buffer. So development is rampant. The good thing about Florida is about 30% of the land has been protected. So that's good, but that doesn't mean it's not still, we need connections between that 30%, right? So it's not enough to just have 30%. If it's all separate, it doesn't count, right? So we need corridors and routes so that the animals, particularly bigger animals like bears and panthers, can move between these natural areas. And the place where I ultimately took those bear pictures was actually particularly disheartening, because I was going there over a 2 to 3 year period. And every time I went, it's in a place just outside of Naples. And there was, a few lots had been developed, but mostly it was still surrounded by pinelands. And in the time that I was visiting it, I saw so many more houses go in. And the reason the bears were there is because it was still forest, right? But over time, what's going to happen? And so, I think everywhere, worldwide, this is an issue. And worldwide, the solution is just making sure that we have these connections to the natural areas. And that, even in the city, that can be done. Little tiny parcels of parks and people's yards, if they have native plants and the right habitat there, animals can learn to use that and thrive.
Are there any species that I guess are actually coming back to Florida?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are are spreading because we've changed the environment. In fact, most of the East used to be forested. And so we only had forest species. So for example, the cover of the book is a gray fox. That was the species that was predominant all through Eastern United States. But as we've cleared the forests, the red fox has moved in and spread its range, and also the coyote. And both of those also were helped by the fact that we've been actively hunting wolves and predators. So it's allowed these species to expand. So wolves and coyotes and red fox are two that are relatively new to Florida. But we also are getting tropical species. So for example, in Miami, we have cave swallows that are from Cuba that have begun nesting in Florida. So there's always change, and we're definitely getting more and more things coming in. We're also getting some things moving out, right? So our roseate spoonbills always used to be in Florida Bay in the Everglades, just south of the Everglades, around the Keys area. And, the conditions there are changing, and it's not so great for them anymore. So they're moving further north. So far, still mostly in Florida, but even now in Georgia and the Carolinas are sometimes getting them as well. So things are shifting, and it's shifting not just in Florida, but even beyond to the neighboring states and neighboring countries, if you look down in the Caribbean.
Kirsten Hines is a biologist turned wildlife photographer based in Miami, Florida. Her new book is Wild Florida, an Animal Odyssey, introducing readers to more than 100 different species of mammals, birds, reptiles, and insects across the state, and the unique and sometimes wildly diverse ecosystems in which they live. It's out now through the University Press of Florida. Kirsten, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
In New York's capital region, one semiconductor manufacturer has been celebrating the role of women in technology, even while acknowledging there's still a long way to go. WAMC's Alexander Babby brings us more from this year's Global Women Conference in Saratoga County.
GlobalFoundries, headquartered in Malta, is advancing efforts to bring more women into tech fields. At a conference in Saratoga Springs, Dr. Isabel Ferrain, the company's vice president for engineering, said even though they often find they're the only woman in engineering rooms, women should stay determined.
It doesn't mean that you don't belong there. It means that you have to identify male allies. Can be your professors, can be your peers, can be students who are ahead of you. So don't give up, because engineering is fun. It's about resolving challenges. It's about being innovative, creating new solutions. So it's a lot of fun. Don't give up, and you'll find allies. The most important is don't stay on your own. Reach out. Don't be afraid of reaching out. I've rarely heard no when I reached out for help.
Dr. Thomas Caulfield, the current CEO, says GlobalFoundries wants to be a 50-50 workforce. It's at 25% now, and hire a female CEO. The company has nearly 13,000 employees. Caulfield is a trustee of Union College in Schenectady. He says women are already being held to higher standards than men.
What I learned in this role, I'm on the admissions committee, and as if you have children going to college, this is what you should know. First of all, early decision. If you want to get to your school, go early decision. Right? Everybody knows that. The second thing is the criteria to admit males versus females is lower in college, or schools would have 60% female, only 40%. So many schools, they try to get a balanced population as close as they can to 50-50. To be able to do that, they actually have to have a lower criteria for men. And that's not just Union College, that's all institutions.
According to the Society of Women Engineers, although the percentage of STEM workers who are women has increased with time, the percentage of women in engineering is still low, with women making up 16% of those in engineering and architecture-related fields and 26.7% of those in computer and mathematical operations, while the percentage of women in most STEM fields solely increased. According to SWE, the percentage of women in computer and math occupations has fallen from its high of 35% in 1990. As a result, Caulfield says, there is no reason for female underrepresentation. Ferrain, who is also global executive sponsor of GlobalFoundries employee resource group Global Women, agrees.
Give everyone a chance. Don't make the decision on behalf of women or underrepresented minorities. Give them a chance to compete. And so don't assume that because men or women have children, have parental duties, or look after family members, that they're not fit for the job. Give them the opportunity, have the discussion. So I think it's important to get rid of that bias that those who are in charge of family or looking after a parent are not capable of leading a successful and rewarding career.
Ferrain says gender bias plays a role in long-held beliefs that parents are less capable workers. GlobalFoundries allows employees to work from home at least 3 days a week. Ferrain says internships remain a key stepping stone into the industry. For WAMC News in Saratoga Springs, I'm Alexander Babby.
One last segment before we go. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the sales of electric vehicles, or EVs, in the U.S. increased from 0.2% of total car sales in 2011 to 4.6% in 2021. EVs are increasingly becoming more marketable, even if price-wise they're still above your average gas-powered model. And the technology behind the batteries that power them is constantly evolving. The California-based company Qnovo is working to develop software that would extend and enhance the life of all kinds of batteries, from the kinds you use in your phone to the ones that might power your car. Our associate producer Jody Cowan recently sat down with the leading ladies of Qnovo working on this technology at different levels. Danya Gantus is the company's co-founder and VP of Technology, who boasts over 25 years in the field and more than 50 patents related to battery development. Joining her are the company's EV battery czar, Denise Gray, who previously directed General Motors' Chevy Volt battery program and served as the president of LG Energy Solution in Michigan, and Tracy McAskew with Daimler Trucks North America, which has been trying to make EVs more appealing to the trucking industry.
The battery is a very critical part of an electric vehicle. It's the most expensive component in an electric vehicle. And just relying on battery, the materials and the chemistry alone is not sufficient. It takes a long time to commercialize, and you can't keep up with the market requirements. And so we took a different approach at Qnovo by using software to improve battery performance. And this has never been done before. So we essentially pioneered a new branch of technology that takes computation and algorithms and combines them with chemistry and data science to expand the performance envelope of batteries. So that allows you to have faster charging without damaging the battery. And it allows the batteries to last longer. So by lasting longer, you're actually helping the environment because they become more sustainable.
I drive a gas-powered vehicle that has a battery. Danya, how is the battery that's in my car now different from one used in an electric vehicle?
That's a great question. So the battery that's in your car is a lead-acid battery. The battery that's in an electric vehicle is a lithium-ion battery. So the lithium-ion battery can store more energy and can be recharged multiple times before it degrades. So it has that ability to last longer. So the chemistry is different, but also the way the battery is used is more efficient than a lead acid battery. It's also much lighter. You know, you've seen your car battery. It's like a big box that you have to pick up and remove and add another one, while lithium-ion batteries are very light. So you can put hundreds of them in a car, and that'll give you 300-400 miles of range.
Combined, you all have over 75 years of experience in various facets of automotive tech and industry. Denise, for you, in what ways have we seen interests and attitudes towards electric vehicles change?
Electric vehicles have been around for 100 years. So the concept of some battery electric allowing for propulsion in the vehicle has been around a long time. But what has happened is a couple of things. Technology has improved to a point where it is now a accepted technology that's affordable, that has the functionality. The second thing that I think has changed is more consciousness around CO2. What's happening with our air quality. That has been, I think, in the last 20, 30 years, that has become more and more of a part of the equation on what products we create and what are we doing when it comes to pollutants. What's our air quality? And so gasoline, which from an energy density perspective is extremely good, it also has its downsides. And so there's been a quest over the last, I don't know, say 3 decades, 4 decades, to determine what might be alternative technologies that will allow for the air quality to be not compromised as we have these vehicles. And so we've looked at, over the years, we've looked at hydrogen fuel cells, we've looked at compressed natural gas, we've looked at battery electric. All of those have always been a part of the solution set, but we needed to determine if the technology was ready, if the costs were at the right price point in order to make it affordable. And so over the last, I would say the last 20, 30 years, especially in the battery technology, it really has, developments have occurred in our country, in other countries, where that price point is now favorable. In order to be able to be a solution for propulsion, for moving a vehicle from point A to point B at an affordable cost, but also dealing with the air quality aspects of it.
And Tracy, do you see parallels in the trucking industry when it comes to people warming up to this technology?
So you definitely have your early adopters who are not necessarily as concerned about truck pricing. However, trucks are a little bit different than cars. You know, trucks are B2B, business to business sale. And so the business owners want to make money and they want a total cost of ownership. So most of them, if they're not an early adopter, they are factoring the cost of the truck into their equation.
Danya, you spoke earlier about the innovative software Qnovo is showcasing in its EV batteries. Can you explain how some of the features like adaptive charging actually work?
Yeah, absolutely. So adaptive charging, really managing the battery as it's being used. As the battery is aging, you manage how the battery is charging so that you're not forcing a lot of current into that battery as it's aging. But there's another area that is super, super important when it comes to electric vehicles, and that's health and safety. Safety is critical for electric vehicles. And, you know, I don't know if you remember 5-6 years ago, there was the Samsung Note 7 that exploded and required a big recall. And these were batteries that were catching on fire. And if your cell phone has just one small battery, the car, an electric vehicle, has hundreds of bigger batteries that are connected together to make one big battery. So a fire in any one of those cells is just catastrophic. And we've seen, you know, over the past couple of years, there have been some recalls because of battery failures that can result in a fire. So our Qnovo software can actually monitors the batteries as they're being used, and then can detect if there is a battery that's rogue among that big battery pack. If there's any one of those batteries that's has a defect and and will create a fire in the future, it can flag it early on so we can reduce the amount of these recalls and then just turn them more into maintenance calls. So that's a big area that we're focusing on, and that's super, super important for electric vehicles.
And I understand another factor you're looking to address with updated technology is weather and how regionality affects the life of a battery in use.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, weather affects the battery. Cold weather is, you know, you don't want to charge your car in cold weather because it can age it faster. You don't want to charge your car when it's too warm outside because that'll age it faster. So in our software, we build the intelligence in the software to be able to deliver kind of the optimal charging regardless of what the weather is.
We talked some about the technological evolution at Qnovo. How about the cultural evolution? How often these days are you finding yourselves still as the only women in the room while pushing this innovation forward?
So for me, I've always been the only woman in the company, or one of two women. I'm usually, until now, I'm still the only woman in an engineering meeting explaining technology. In investor meetings, you know, throughout my companies. And I've been more in the startup world, so where, you know, the amount of women is usually very small. It's usually, you can count it on one hand. And so, but I've seen change over time, and at Qnovo, you know, our leadership team is 50-50. So we've got very strong women on our leadership team. We've got very strong women on our board and on our advisory teams, and that is really very exciting to see. But you know, it's been that way, and I think you just, you know, stick to your mission and you continue to do what you have to do.
I was going to echo that. The challenge is people, it's unrecognized talent. It's not underrepresented. We have great numbers. So we have critical mass of women in technology, but sometimes they haven't been recognized and supported the way they need to be supported. Some people have, you know, left the workforce altogether. So I think it's about 10% women engineers, but there's 25% trained. So at some point we're losing 15% because they don't feel that recognition. I believe that is changing. I have seen a change in my decades in the industry where we do have more and more women at the table and more people of color at the table. And so I'm very encouraged by Qnovo's ability to recognize this talent and seek it out. I happen to come to Qnovo through an organization called Him for Her, which works to put women on boards. There are organizations that exist that help connect the talent to the companies that are truly seeking them.
And I would just add, and I love that phrase that they're just not recognized. I love that, Tracy. I would also say that I think in new technology, there's an opportunity for those who haven't been recognized to now be recognized. I had the fortune to work on battery technology and software at GM. And it was, again, only a few women, only a few people of color in the room. But it was an opportunity to move into new areas where you have to recognize because there's not so many people there. And therefore, being able to work on those new technologies, I think were also opportunities to be recognized for the capability and the experience level. But I would also say that it takes a leader to recognize a leader. There are other leaders that aren't so having that courage to put maybe someone who majority of people don't know in the room, to put them in an area of leadership. But there are some who do. To do technology takes courage. And it takes courage to see and to plot out areas of the unknown because you see evidence of capability in the technology. You see what the world needs, and therefore you go for it. So you will find that many of those in technology areas, many of the women in the industry, we see and we work beyond that is seen and where our paychecks come from, because we all kind of answer to a higher being of helping the world, helping the earth, helping our families. And yes, we do work at company X, but we're able to continue to push that way.
Ladies, I really appreciate you taking the time. This was a wonderful conversation. Any final thoughts to leave our listeners with?
You know, I think that we are just scratching the surface, what we're doing right now on the EV charging part, and that will evolve and it will become better optimized as more EVs are deployed. There will be new battery technologies that will come out eventually over the next 5 to 10 years. So we can't stay with what is here today. So we have to adapt to the new battery technologies and new requirements that'll come in the future. So it's an adaptive software, and it'll adapt to the changing requirements.
And I would just like to add that I think it's just very important for our listeners to recognize the importance of sustainability. I think our country is one where we are heavy consumers of typical gasoline cars. I know it is like 50-50 now, and it's going to get there all the way there. So I just want to impress upon our listeners the importance of adoption. And then from a company perspective, all of our companies need to be thinking about those applications that today aren't seen as very suitable for battery electric. What else can we do to have zero emissions? What else can we do to reduce carbon footprint? What else can we do? Do we need to look at central drive? Maybe it's beyond the battery, maybe it is the hydrogen, but we need to continue to press the mark to continue and improve the conditions for sustainability for future generations to come, because we want to leave the earth a better place for the youth.
That was Tracy McAskew, Dania Gantus, and Denise Gray discussing their work with the battery tech company Qnovo and the future of electric vehicles. They spoke with our associate producer, Jody Cowan. Thanks for joining us for this week's 51%. 51% is a national production of WAMC Northeast Public Radio in Albany, New York. It's produced and hosted by me, Jesse King. Our associate producer is Jody Cowan, and our theme is Lolita by the Albany-based artist Girl Blue. Just a reminder that you can listen to 51% anytime at WAMCpodcasts.org or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can stay in the loop on all of WAMC's shows by signing up for our weekly newsletter Airwaves at WAMC.org. We hope you'll join us next week. Until then, I'm Jesse King, 51%.
I was every single girl, I was nobody else, I was so sure of myself. I was 15 and a half, he was a hollow laugh. And I lost my cool somewhere along the way. The nightmare down the hallway, I had to learn how to look away. I lost my cool